helping CEOs and business leaders discover the energy to perform exceptional brilliance and positively impact the lives of those around them. Be inspired by world leaders and next-level gurus. This is the Active CEO podcast, where the ordinary don't belong. And now your hosts, Craig Johns and Ben Gathercole.
On this episode of the Active CEO podcast, we're doing something for the first time. We're interviewing a dynamic duo who combine the passions and purpose in life with other people all around the world. They may be young, but are very wise when it comes to human development. Their lives involve finding some amazing physical challenges and combining it with helping people improve their mental, emotional, and leadership performance. As founders of Mountains and Marathons, they've had quite different careers. One of the founders was a strength conditioning coach at Essendon Football Club and is a serial entrepreneur, founding 5 companies in the last 10 years. The other founder is passionate about personal development, having spent time with Tony Robbins and the Robbins-Madanes Training as a strategic intervention coach. She loves consulting, coaching and advising people on how to unlock and optimize their potential. We're about to take you on a roller coaster ride as we explore their amazing foresight and incredible work they're doing with Mountains and Marathons. Ben and I are on the edge of our seat as we get set to introduce and welcome you to our very special guests, Jamin Heppell and Jen Ziegner. Jamin and Jen, welcome to the show.
Craig, Ben, really excited to be here.
Great to be in the show. Thanks for having us.
Excellent. All right, well, Jamin, let's start with you. I'd like to go back a year in your life and explain what was going on when a little voice in your head was shouting, "Take a damn break. Slow down a bit, sit, listen, reflect, relax." What was that all about?
Yeah, it's I guess for me, Craig, I had spent a good period of my 20s on what I'd describe as the hamster wheel of the entrepreneurial game, which is kind of doing whatever it takes to avoid a 40-hour week with an 80-hour week. And for me, in the companies that I'd created, so much of my time, energy, and financial resources had been invested in creating initiatives and creating companies that were not only designed to return a financial investment, but also have a social impact. And for me, contributing to the betterment of my community has always been something that I was incredibly committed to and passionate about. And I think for a long time, actually probably for 3 years before things sort of really come to I guess the low point for me, was I was just endlessly trapped or feeling trapped inside of this. I have to keep doing this, my community needs me. What will people say if I stop doing what I'm doing? And just continually trapped in this story that like things will fall apart if I slow down. And for me, ultimately, Craig, where that come to was it was a point where I sat with myself one evening and I really asked myself the question after a bit of an emotional point in time. I just asked myself the question. I was like, if I could be doing anything in the world right now, what would I be doing? And within 5 minutes, I had this vision of, I don't think I'd be doing what I'd be doing now. I would be running marathons and climbing mountains all around the world. And the moment I got clarity on that, I was like, right, that's where my heart is. That's what I want to be doing. That's what I need to be doing. I am the creator of my current struggle, my current suffering. I caused all of this. I can be responsible for creating something different. So, all right, I've got the clarity. Let's take action.
That's all about having that choice, right? So everyone goes, "Oh, I'm busy," or they kind of get stuck, as you say, on that hamster wheel. But really, it's just a choice, and it's your decision to say, "You know what? This is not how I want to live my life." And you've then got to be able to make that decision to move forward.
100%. And I think that it's easy to forget that everything that is in our life is a choice. And, there are certainly things where life throws the curveballs and whatnot, but the more we don't choose that, the more we resist what is, the more suffering we endure. And fortunately for me, I recognized that in that moment, that every bit of my suffering was caused by myself, which then ultimately had me go, great. If I choose this suffering, I can also choose my way out of it.
So, Jamin, I guess I'm interested to, you're young, and that's very profound and very thoughtful. How did you grow up, and how did these thoughts originate?
Yeah, so I grew up in a little country town called Leongatha, which is about an hour and a half southeast of Melbourne. And I grew up in an incredibly active and sporty family. I'm the eldest of three boys, and my parents, Paul and Anne-Marie, they were two local athletes who come together, and then they produced one of the most competitive households you could ever imagine. And as the eldest of three boys, so much of what I wanted to do was really, really make my parents proud. And therefore, so much of what I stepped into was, how can I be the best? Initially, it was probably the best at everything, and then over time, that kind of transitioned into how can I be the best version of myself? And so, for me, growing up, that predominantly looked like stepping into Aussie rules and basketball and netball, and basically putting my hand up for every leadership opportunity that come my way. And so, stepping into captaincy of a lot of teams in my younger years, and then, SRC and debate team captain, and eventually school captain. I've always kind of gravitated towards those leadership roles and taking on particular challenges that took me out of my comfort zone. And fortunately for me, I started doing that quite young, which then just sort of ingrained a bit of a habit of stepping into the discomfort and cultivating greater ability to be with uncertainty quite young. And I think that's sort of probably then what sparked a bit of an entrepreneurial spur for me. I always aspired to be an elite athlete, but after 6 knee surgeries by the age of 22, I finally let that go as a pipe dream, and really channeled a lot of my energy that had gone into my sport. I really started to transpire that into how can I be contributing to the betterment of my communities, and then that ultimately led to
So how did the community mindedness come about? Like you talk about being competitive and family environment drove you to be competitive sport and so forth, but the real community minded part of it.
Yeah, I guess growing up in a small community where so much of the town revolved around sport and knowing your neighbour. I was always just kind of felt this deeper sense of connectedness to people, and recognise the value that bringing community together, bringing people together had on one's greater sense of self and well-being. Now, obviously, as a 16-year-old, I might not have been able to articulate it quite that way, but I was always sort of emotionally or energetically connected to the importance of community. And so I think for me, initially when I was around 16, I was at a point in my life where I was really inspired to play Aussie rules footy at the top level. And I remember that was at a point in time where I made a choice to step onto the track and start training with the seniors. And so this is all the men aged 18 to 30-ish within Leongatha. And I remember there was a moment when the moment I walked out on the track, I just immediately got confronted with a whole bunch of very derogatory language. So whether that was, don't be gay, or stop being a fag, or, a lot of sexist remarks. And I remember at that point in time, I was really confronted by that, because I was like, here I am. All I want to do is play senior footy. And I need to make sure that I get along with my teammates and be a part of this in order to feel like I can, get a game. But at the same time, I'm like, this is not, I don't want to be anything like you guys. And so that was then kind of what sparked a bit of a hunger in me to want to be able to leverage the power of sport initially to be a greater transformative agent in grassroots communities. And then that ultimately then transpired into me taking part in a leadership development program when I was 17 years old, run by the YMCA Victoria, and that was the first time in my life when there were 60 young people aged 16 to 19 all brought together into one space where we spent an entire week just learning about our strengths and weaknesses, our vision for the world, the way in which we wanted to impact our communities. And I remember I come back from that experience so inspired by what I had experienced that I was like, every young person deserves to experience something like this. And as I come back, I was like, how would I get my mates to engage in something like this? And that was the moment when I was like, if we could connect the power of leadership development and the power of sport together into one organisation, I wonder what that would look like. And so that was kind of the beginning of the foundations of my first organisation called Game Changers Australia, which is effectively leveraging the power of sport for social change. And that was, I guess, the beginning for me of stepping into the entrepreneurial space, really looking at how business can be a direct agent for social good.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. So we'll delve into that a little bit later on. Jen, we want to know a little bit about you. So were you in that same kind of headspace that Jamin was, when you felt like you needed to slow down and take a break, or were you at a different point in time when you came together and looked at mountains and marathons as a business?
Sure. I wasn't quite a different space. I have been working in Australia for about 2.5 years in the social innovation and impact investing space, which is a topic, an area, an industry that I'm incredibly passionate about and still really committed to. And at that time, though, while I loved my job and what I was doing, I was basically working for an organization where I was leading a project where we supported social enterprises and impact-driven businesses to raise investment for the first time. And I absolutely loved that role and what we were standing for and what it did in the world. However, I personally noticed that after about 1.5 or 2 years in the same role, I needed a new challenge. And within that smaller organization, I wasn't quite sure where that would go. There wasn't much space for me to grow personally, and also wasn't quite sure what the next step would be. At the same time, I've been working with about 100 different organizations, small businesses over the last 4 or 5 years, and always had this big passion for entrepreneurship, especially purpose-driven businesses. Yet I had never gone out and started my own. So basically when we came up with the idea for Mountains and Marathons, on one side, I love what it's all about, of course, which you're going to go in more. It was also my personal opportunity to finally go out and start the business and do something myself in that space, and definitely grow a hell of a lot personally.
I bet you learned a lot during that time, very scary time when you first go out into the entrepreneurial world, and you're now relying on yourself to really drive the income that's coming in to put food on the table. Can you go into a little bit around what that was like for you personally during those, especially that first phase of making that step to go, you know what, I'm not going to work for anyone else now, I'm going to work for myself. And what was it like transitioning into the first few months? It kind of, I think for me personally, was scary to some degree. At the same time, I do have to say that, coming to Australia 2.5 years before, at the time I came to Australia, I didn't know a person there. I didn't have a long-term visa. I just had a working holiday visa at the time. I had not much money in my bank account, so there was already a whole lot of uncertainty. And then I spent about a year working for different organizations in part-time roles until I finally got a sponsorship, right? And then after a year later, the sponsorship had to be renewed, and there was a whole phase of uncertainty again. So I would definitely say, even though I was coming from a full-time job, I definitely had dealt with a lot of uncertainty throughout these years. And that's, I think, why for me it wasn't the same as for someone who's leaving like a really stable corporate job, one of the big four, let's say, after 10 years of working there, which of course is a massive change.
for me, it was a shift. It was a big shift to say, okay, now I'm really 100% myself, together with Jamin, responsible and accountable for bringing in the dollars. If we don't, no one's going to do it. But at the same time, I was definitely very used to the levels of uncertainty.
So, Jen, that situation sounds like it made you really agile as a leader and a person and a risk taker.
I would say so. As I said, living with uncertainty is definitely something I've gotten used to. And even all the years before, you may have heard I'm originally from Germany. You may have noticed it on the accent. And basically, over the last 8 years or so, I've lived in 6 different countries, constantly seeing how I can grow and evolve and explore new things and have new experiences. And so I basically chose having to have life work in lots of different places and different cultures. For instance, I studied and lived in Cuba for 8 months when I was 21, just searching for something that's a completely out of the box and different experience from what I was used to. So already, like in my younger years, in my early 20s, I was constantly seeking out opportunities to have completely different new experiences. And so I think there have been lots of things in my life where I have started to develop that agility, as you say, and resilience at a younger age.
So now this is off script a little bit, but I really need to ask the question, how did Jamin and yourself meet and eventually become partners and venture into business?
Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
We
it just sounds like it'll be a good story by the sounds of this. It can't be regular. Please don't tell me you just met at the coffee shop or something.
Yeah, Jen just pointed at me and said, "You've got this one." My ex-business partner, he got invited to an event held at Street Coffee in Melbourne, which itself is a phenomenal social enterprise, for an event that Jen's organisation, Impact Investment Australia, was hosting to launch a new grant that was all about supporting social enterprises to really level up to become investment ready. And I got invited along with my business partner as the plus one. And I remember walking into the venue, and we'd sort of arrived just as things were kicking off, and I saw this really cute girl get up to welcome everybody and get things started. And I was like, oh, she's pretty cute. And then sure enough, the formalities closed, and it was just moved to kind of the networking stage of the event. And this cute blonde girl was doing the rounds and connecting with different people. And then my business partner, he introduced me to Jen. And I was like, oh, this is nice, and let's have this moment of personal interaction, and things were going well. And then it got about 15 to 20 minutes into the conversation, and it shifted away from work and got into personal conversation quite quickly. And I had this flickering thought that was like, Jen definitely should have moved on to speak to other people by now. I reckon she might be interested. Anyway, this is just my egotistical mind going, I think I'm in with a chance here. And so my business partner, he come up to me and said, Jamin, look, we've got to get going. And I said, yeah, mate, look, I really want to take Jen on a date. He's like, yeah, no worries. Look, I've got her on Facebook. I'll introduce you guys and you can take it from there. And I'm like, awesome. Thanks for your support, man. I'm going to do it my way. And so then I've just gone up to Jen. I've gone, hey, listen, Jen, I've really enjoyed connecting tonight. Do you mind if I grab your number? I'd love to take you on a date. To which Jen's gone, yeah, sure. And I'm like, oh, yes. The number. Hunter and I, we leave, we go and sit down for dinner. By the time dinner arrived on the table, I'd already messaged Jen. We'd lined up a date for Sunday night. And then I show Hunter and he goes, oh, well played, mate. And,
better than the Facebook play.
Yeah, in which moment I look down at my feet and I'm like, crap, forgot my bag. So then I had to stand up and then walk back into the venue where I'd just met Jen, where she was cleaning up, and then here I awkwardly come in and go, oh, hey, forgot my bag, grab the bag.
So convenient.
Walk back out, and then I was like, man, that was not the smooth move that I was intending on making. But I guess she was probably getting a bit more of an insight into what she was signing up for from the get-go.
Very much so. Yeah, I should have connected there.
So we can kind of gather you're explorers, and you love just kind of throwing yourselves out there. So let's delve into mountains and marathons. What is it? How does it work? and what's it doing to change people's lives?
Awesome. So Mountains and Marathons, it's a leadership company that supports people to develop greater clarity, courage, and confidence through taking on a 6-month leadership program that centers around epic physical challenge, such as running a marathon or climbing a mountain. Now, specifically, what it does is it really looks at the individual and their leadership in its entirety, and really focusing on not just like business performance, but really how do you level up in all areas of life that are important to you, including your health, including your family life, including your mental and emotional well-being, and ultimately developing the whole person inside of this 6-month structured program. And ultimately these culminate in these epic physical challenges that are delivered in a face-to-face capacity, because the events that we choose, particularly with the marathons, already exist somewhere in the world. So, for example, we have our Two Oceans Marathon leadership program coming up in the event, the retreat itself taking place in 6 months' time, but the leadership program literally starting next week. And the leadership program takes place virtually and online, but ultimately all the members of this program will come together from all around the world and meet face-to-face in South Africa to take part in the marathon retreat when we arrive in April next year.
So where are these locations? Can you explain a bit more about some of the other locations that you're going to? Because I know there's some pretty damn cool spots that you've been to.
Absolutely, and we definitely chosen, especially with the marathons, the ones that aren't your standard ones, because there's lots of normal marathons out there, and we chose the other ones. So personally, we basically looked at what would it look like to do this on every continent, right? If we can really ourselves, but also offer for our members to go to any continent they want to. And so what we've done so far, we've just finished our first program in Patagonia. So we did the Patagonia International Marathon Leadership Program. Right now, we're in the midst of our Kilimanjaro program. The next one, as Jamin just started, Two Oceans Marathon, which is an ultra marathon, 56 kilometers in South Africa. And then we go to the Great Wall of China. So we're actually going to run a marathon on the Great Wall of China with about 15 to 20,000 steps in between. And what do we have coming up after that? Mont Blanc. We go to Mont Blanc, which... Actually, last year, Jamin and I, we participated in the Mont Blanc Marathon, which was our second marathon, and a bit of a crazy thing to take on for a second marathon, to be honest. Took Jamin 7 hours, me 9 hours. But what we didn't do in that time was to actually climb Mont Blanc, and we really fell in love with the Chamonix region and the French Alps. It's an absolutely extraordinary place in the world, and one of the most beautiful ones we've been to so far. And so we said, let's actually build a leadership program around that and take a group of people there and go back with our members. And then next year, other than that, we have coming up the San Francisco Marathon. We go to Everest Base Camp. We come back home to the Melbourne Marathon. Have I forgotten one in between?
No, that's it.
Yeah.
And then
we'll finish in Melbourne.
We'll finish in Melbourne, and then that'll complete the programs that we've planned up until this point.
Yeah.
I just love the fact that you've created this leadership and this business and this vision around your passion and your desire to go out and run different marathons in different locations and adventures. It's a full credit and something that you don't hear of very often.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Yeah. I mean, from our perspective, it really has come from a place of inquiry within our own personal lives, and having, I guess, the central question being, if we were to live our most values-aligned life, how would our life be different? And taking that from both a personal perspective, where Jen and I recognized that we really wanted to, we were relatively new in our relationship when we created this. There was an intention for us to really, what would it look like to have this journey kind of formulate and cultivate and create our relationship and our future together, as well as enable us to transform our own physical lives and become people we never thought we could be. And then at the same time enable other people to do the same. And so leveraging some of our core values of courage and of adventure and of integrity and of contribution. A lot of these core themes, which are inherent within our own personal values as well as our relationship values, we're like, how would a business look if we were to really live in alignment with our values through a business? And it's sort of gone through a number of different iterations, but ultimately we're sort of in the honing phase now, where we've got a lot more clarity on exactly how this works and how we best operate this company that really does serve people to transform their lives as we do for ourselves.
So it's obviously that whole thing around the more you give leads to the more you get, and you're obviously living proof of that, where you're putting so much into other people and helping them, but at the same time you're getting a lot out of it because it's transforming your life as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, absolutely.
Yeah, so I want to go a little bit deeper into the leadership aspects and that development of that in the mountains and marathons. Apart from the actual physical challenges and climbing the mountains or doing the marathons, what stands apart and what's different about your leadership program that that really changes people's lives?
I think I would first start with what we mean when we say leadership, right? Because I believe that with the mountain marathons, we have a bit of a broader view around leadership than what you would often associate it with. So for us, leadership doesn't come with a title on your business card or a promotion or with having a certain size of a team that you're guiding within an organization. For us, leadership really is a choice that you're making and a commitment to seeing and developing the potential in other people and situations, no matter who you are and what kind of professional role you're in. And we really see that, if we look at the broader picture of the world right now, we actually really believe that we need more leaders in the world, people who take on contributing that potential in people and situations independent of who they are and which organization that they're working for. So that's the first one, and which basically also means that the people we're working with, sometimes they are really leaders in the traditional sense in their organization, and they may have a really high corporate role, but that's not always the case. And we really welcome everyone who themselves says, okay, I want to develop as a leader in my own right. Now, underlying the whole structure of our program is basically the hypothesis: can you leverage an epic physical challenge in doing something that you didn't think you could do to transform all other areas of your life? Right? That was basically what it was all about. So it's not just about we're doing this leadership program and then at the end we also happen to be running a marathon or climbing a mountain. It's actually, how can we leverage everything that's coming up in the pursuit of something that you've never done before in order to develop personally and to become the people who we want to become. And in that process, we really look at all kinds of different areas of life. Yes, we look at how you're leading your team and how you're showing up in your job. But if there's something else in the way, if there's a relationship with the sibling that's really painful and unresolved, we go to work on that. Obviously, there's a big aspect around the whole physical side and the physical well-being and fitness that we're working on. So it's a really holistic approach to developing the whole person.
No, it's a great approach. And have you got any some impressive kind of success stories you've had so far that you can share? Where did the person start? Where are they now? And what was kind of the real key intervention that has led to them catalyzing their change?
Yeah, I think probably drawing upon the recent completion of the Patagonia Marathon Leadership Program would be the best one to go there. We had a couple of one of our members in particular. He organizational psychologist and very renowned within his work as a consultant based in Australia. He one of the reasons that he signed up was because he'd recently been through a divorce with his wife, And he, and I'd personally supported him through a bit of the challenging points in time as that was taking place. And when we put out the Patagonia International Marathon Leadership Program, he said, Jamin, look, I don't know what this is going to take. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I'm committed to moving into this next chapter of my life. And that was kind of the intention that he brought into it. And the beauty of how the program unfolded was, as he continued to show up day after day, doing the training specifically for the marathon, we were also having our weekly coaching calls that were enabling us to, yes, talk about how his general well-being was, both mentally and emotionally and physically, but then also talk about just some of those other unresolved areas of his life. And ultimately, for him, where that landed was him really being able to get to a point of forgiveness for what took place in his relationship, and ultimately start to get to work on moving into forgiving himself for some of the breakdowns in the relationship. And what that then ultimately conspired into was him really beginning to recognise some other relationships in his life that he'd perhaps let slip over time, or hadn't really enabled the deepest possible level of connection with some of his closest mates to take place. And so he began to really focus on those areas that, when you ask people what are the important parts of your life, and he really distinguished that relationships as one for him. And he's like, okay, cool, I've got kind of career down, but there are definitely some other areas that I want to focus on. And for him, he really channeled a lot of his energy in the program into cultivating amazing relationships. So that's one example. Another is a woman who was in a job she thought she loved, and it kind of gave her a lot of great sort of social recognition and social status, and something that she loved to kind of like talk about in a public environment. But when she really sat with herself and asked the question, like, is this what I really want to be doing? With a lot of initial resistance, she eventually got to the point about halfway through the program and said, you know what, this just isn't a values alignment for me, and this isn't what I want to be doing anymore. And so she went through a journey of recognizing, okay, if that's not what I want to do, what do I want to do? And then, made the move to then hand in the letter of resignation, and then step into by the end of the program, was planning the next chapter of her life and what that was going to look like. Or another example is a man who's in our Mount Kilimanjaro leadership program. Now, I know we're only 7 weeks in, but he's very, very overweight, 6'6", 190 kilos. And recognised that there was a lot in his life where he's made choices that have ultimately led to him being in this state of health. And he's really connected to what's possible inside of dealing with not only his health, but also perhaps some of the other emotional challenges that he's faced over the years, and begin to confront those and pull them out from under the bed, and actually get real power in his life through pursuing the ultimate epic physical challenge of getting to the roof of Africa.
Yeah, wow. It's evident to me that your program is a real mind, body and soul type program, and you guys really engage and buy into, or not, shouldn't say buy into it, but you really engage fully with the program. I guess my next question is, how do you both bring your A game to running your programs? What makes you guys tick and drive to keep it going?
So one of the key distinctions and things that we teach in our programs is the concept of integrity, right? Which we simply define as doing what you say you would do. And for us personally as coaches, we know that every single day we have to show up in alignment with what we would like, how we would like our members to show up, and better, which basically means that if we ask our members or tell them to stick to the training plan that they have, or tell them to have hard conversations, we cannot afford to miss a single training session ourselves. And when we come up in a certain relationship that we have in our lives where a conversation is to be had, we cannot afford not to do that. because as we get on those coaching calls, every single time, if we ask them to do something, we have to have integrity within ourselves and know that we can ask them to do that, because we show up as these people and as these kinds of people as well. And I've actually noticed, we had a couple of weeks between our first and our second program just then, and I've actually noticed that I allowed myself to slip a little bit in a few areas, and I noticed that as soon as our new program started again and we were coaching others again, I had a way stronger pull to live in full integrity myself and align with my values, because I knew that if I don't do that, there's no way I can ask our members to do it and to be the coach I want to be. So for me, really, every single day when I get out and do a workout or do any of those other sometimes uncomfortable things, I don't just do it for myself, but I do it just as much for our members. And sometimes sometimes potentially I wouldn't do it if it was just for me, but I do it because I know I do it for them as well, even though they will never know whether I've done it or not. And other than that, when it comes to staying on top of our game, I think what we always come back to is that we have basically designed a company that requires us to do what we love to do. So our business requires us to always stay physically fit and healthy. Like if we don't train and if we don't get fit for the ultra marathon, it's going to make a bit of a bad impression on the business. It's going to be a very
long day.
It has in this business. So we literally can't hide it, right? So it really does require it. And that's the beauty of it. And that's what we love, because like business, life, it's not two separate things, right? It's all the same thing. And I believe when people can really find a way to do business in a way that it requires them to live in alignment with their values and be in integrity, that's just a really beautiful thing.
I love hearing the authenticity and the genuinity of what you're doing and how you're speaking. So we all know smart people have great answers, but the best people have great questions. So when was the last time you did something for the first time?
And we want both answers here from both of you.
Yeah. My initial response is start a company that declares that we're going to run a marathon on every continent. I haven't done that before.
No. Wouldn't be too many people that boat either.
Yeah. I think the one that really comes to mind, I think, as we're traveling the world, there's lots of little firsts, particularly for me, having spent, pretty much 28 years of my entire life only in Australia, to now be traveling the world and having a go at Spanish and, a few other things. There's like lots of little things, but I think the main one that probably comes to mind, guys, is Jen has always been a very passionate Latin dancer, and specifically of the domain of bachata. And when we were dating in the early days, Jen said, "I really want to get back into bachata." To which, that just brought back flashbacks of my year 11 debutante ball and how much of two left feet I actually have. And I was like, oh God, what does this mean? And, and surely enough, Jen's like, no, let's do it. And so I, to a degree reluctantly said, right, let's give this a go. And next thing you know, I'm looking at myself in a mirror trying to move these hips that, all they've ever experienced is 1,000 sit-ups and a lot of planks, but not much mobility. And there I am learning how to bachata dance. And surely enough, it's an 8-week course, and each week Jen and I'd show up for the 2-hour session and, could gradually see improvement. But at the end of the 8-week course, they have the dance studio that we're at, had the bit where they invite all the members of the studio to come together and effectively kind of show off the choreographed dance you'd learn across the course of the 8 weeks.
This is the Dancing with the Stars bit.
Yeah, exactly. And so, so this studio, it's been running for a few years, and there's beginner, intermediate and advanced classes, and they invite all their members to come along. And the week before this particular, the Dancing with the Stars event, they asked the question, so who's going to be there? And, so there was 12 in the class, and 6 of us put our hands up, and we go, great. Awesome. Well, you guys will be able to showcase what you've learnt here to all the other members. And so, sure enough, like Jen and I roll in a Sunday later, and I walk in there and I'm looking around just trying to find some familiar faces, and I'm like, okay, I know Jen and I know the dance instructors. I don't know anybody else. And then Liz, the lead instructor, gets up and she goes, so we're going to start with beginner bachata. And then here's Jen and I. Like, I'm just sitting there like my heart is pounding. Like I haven't been this nervous since like pretty much since my debutante ball like 10 years ago. And sure enough, we get up there and we're the only ones. There's 40 people watching. We're the only ones up there, and I'm just like, I was packing myself. And so in that moment, I'm just like, all right, this one's going on the record as like, okay, it's embracing discomfort, stepping into vulnerability. It's going to be over soon, and you're going to be a better human because of it. Just do.
It was all for love.
Show up, Peps. Just show up.
And Jen, for you?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I feel like there's so many small firsts that we're encountering all the time, especially because we're constantly in new places and so on. But one that's really coming to mind for me, a recent one that was quite a scary one, is we were in Argentina, as we said, in this house sitting in this beautiful place, a bit in the middle of nowhere. So really in this tiny village, and behind our house basically was just more or less desert rocks, heaps of cactus, and a lot of just a lot of dryness and a lot of hills. And one day, Jamin and I, we went out for a hike, and we get to this this rock wall, and there was the option to just basically walk a whole way back and move around it, or we could move up that wall. And so I've always, as long as I can remember really, have had a real fear of climbing. And I've just never climbed anything. I've just always avoided it. And so I'm standing there, looking up there, and looking at Jamin. Jamin goes, should we have a go? And for him, it's not an issue at all, right? For him, it's just a thing that he does but nearly every day when he goes out there into those hills. And I'm like, yeah, let's give it a go. And so I start scrambling up the wall, slowly putting one foot in front of the other, and trying to cautiously grab my hands in the stones, and everything's all right. And then suddenly I'm not even sure what it was, but I'm on this wall, and there's this split second of a moment where I remember how scared I actually am of that. So it wasn't even anything in that moment that was so scary, but I suddenly thought, oh, I've always got this fear of climbing up walls. Okay, and after 2 or 3 seconds, that was good again. And then about 30 seconds later, I'm literally hanging on this wall. It's not even a specifically tricky place or so, but I'm hanging on this wall, standing there, and without even thinking, basically it's a bit as if I had an emotional. A neurological shutdown, and I suddenly stand there. This massive wall of fear floods over me, and I just start crying. And I'm crying in an absolute critter state. I'm like, Jamin, I don't know what to do. I'm so scared. I'm just looking down there. I'm like, I don't know how to go up. I don't know how to go down. I don't know how to do anything. And it was a really tough moment to overcome. Unfortunately, Jamin really got in that moment that it was quite serious for me. He knew that there wasn't any actual danger in that situation. But he did get that for me, in my brain something was off, and really slowly coached me through getting my composure back. And I think after maybe 5 minutes or so, I had calmed down a little bit and slowly started making moves forward, and then everything was good again. A couple of minutes later, we were standing on top of the rock wall, but that was an interesting one, because I was going, yep, I can do this, and I generally have developed this attitude towards life, starting with the first marathon, but then many other things of just trying new things and being courageous and having the fear be there and still doing it. And in that moment, it really hit me how deep sometimes the fear is still within me, and I felt quite proud of having overcome that.
And
yeah.
So Jen, is that still a fear for you? Can you climb things now?
It's an interesting one. I haven't tried since then. It was only a few weeks back, but it's actually something I love to work with more. because it's likely going to be something that's going to come up more as we're climbing mountains, etc. as well.
I think those things, the company's names, Marathon and Mountains. It's going to happen sometime here. Yeah.
A bit more exposure therapy.
Yeah. Yes.
It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. I mean, sharing your vulnerabilities, discussing your fears, but really talking about that, taking that step from where you were in life to going, you know what, I'm going to transform both myself and a whole lot of people, and let's do it in a really, really cool way, and something unique and different that no one else is doing. Your energy is really infectious, and we could talk to you for hours. It's just so much fun, and so really, really enjoy it. So thank you very much for sharing your story, your whole the ideas and the reasons and the purpose for mountains and marathons, which I know are going to change a lot of people's lives in many, many ways. So just thank you so much for what you're doing, and it's been a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Awesome.
Likewise, it was a great pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks, Ben. We really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you very much, and we wish you luck with everything that you're going to do. Our active CEO wellness tip for this episode is about being stuck for time, and how do you make the most of the time that you do have in your day.
Oh, how many people sit in traffic and congestion and just getting frustrated, and they're getting stressed before they even get to work, and they've just wasted a whole lot of time where if they'd maybe take a road to work or run to work, they'd probably get there at the same time or maybe 10 minutes later, but they've actually combined two things at once. They've been really, smart about the way they're living their life.
Yeah, exactly. And you hear that classic one all the time about maybe get off the bus a stop or two earlier. So you're still commuted into work, but you're also just making sure that your activity level is up for the day and you're staying moving the entire time.
Yeah, it allows you to declutter a little bit as well, and clears your mind, and you're thinking. You might be able to think about a strategy or a way you're going to approach a meeting that day, or even when you're coming home. You can go, all right, well, there's my chance to wrap up what I did today, clear that out, so when I walk inside that house, I'm on my A game for my family.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's nothing worse than coming home and continually thinking about the day's problems that you had at work and trying to engage with the family correctly. So that ability to declutter on the way, rather than just be time poor, is really important.
Can use it as that light switch on, switch off, and ready for your next phase of your life that day.
Yep, absolutely.
It's been a really energizing show today, a lot of fun. It was great talking to Jamin and Jen, just a ball of energy. It's contagious, their energy, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. To have them both on the same vibe, it was just really heartening to listen to, and certainly something that people would really, hopefully people really gel to.
Yeah, what a great way to develop that leadership skills. It's taking on a physical challenge. It's testing yourself and your ability, and the emotions that come out, the things that you start to discover about your character and the way you cope in different situations can really transfer across to the way you lead, not only in the workplace, but also family and other aspects of your life.
Yeah, some of those examples that Jamin gave us were really, life-changing. So this course was really moving people away from what they might have experienced in the past, made them really think about where they currently were and how they wanted to go forward in their life. Life-changing moment, really.
Oh, I talked about some great locations to go to as well. Patagonia, Mont Blanc.
Yeah.
Wow, just to go see those places.
Yeah, Great Wall of China. They're going to run a marathon there. Up into South Africa for an ultra marathon. Really just iconic locations, and they're out there living it, breathing it.
Oh man, I can see you strapping on your shoelaces now, putting on your shoes, getting your shoelaces tied up. So we might see Ben Gath go on a mountains to marathons in the future.
Might have to wait till tomorrow morning on that one, Craig.
Oh, that was the Active CEO podcast. Where the ordinary don't belong.
Join the Active CEO movement by visiting www.nrg2perform.com. That's NRG2perform.com. Share this podcast on LinkedIn and be sure to tag in NRG to Perform. Leave a review on iTunes. Drop us a line with your feedback and questions, and connect with us on the NRG to Perform Facebook and Instagram pages. Be sure to check out the next Active CEO podcast, where the ordinary don't belong.